The task at hand will be extremely difficult, and there will be numerous obstacles to overcome. But if you dig down deep into your inner strength, you may have a measure of success, a measure of success.
So I've had the pleasure of knowing Rick for a very long time too, since I was 10 years old. One of my earliest memories of Rick is poolside at Moana Pool in the early 1990s. Mr. Laing is writing his program on the whiteboard. We're all still tired and chlorinated from the 5 a.m. swim that morning and a long day at school, wondering how we're going to make it through this workout. Rick strolls on pool deck and the mood lightens. Danyon stands to attention. Rick grew up in Dunedin, the fifth of 6 children of Betty and Duncan Laing. He attended Otago Boys High School. Anybody from Otago Boys High School here? Just Rick. Xavier. In the late 1970s, played rugby, soccer, and basketball at school, and excelled at swimming and surf lifesaving like his father. He got his Bachelor of Physiotherapy from Otago University in 1985. He was physiotherapist for the Otago rugby team from 1987 to 1994. He operated his own physiotherapy clinic in Dunedin, specializing in working with local athletes like Xavier. And he traveled to Commonwealth Games, World Championships, and pre-Olympic swim camps with New Zealand teams between 1991 and 1999. Motivating and assisting with the coaching of Danyon Loader to 2 Olympic gold medals in the 1996 Atlanta Olympics, the second swimmer in history to win the 200 and 400 freestyle combination. Rick continues to exert a powerful influence as a coach of world-class swimmers at Tucson Ford Aquatics. Please join me in welcoming Rick Laing.
You could do, I suppose.
Yeah.
Favourite sporting sons, Andrew James Duncan Laing was actually born in Taranaki in 1931. From an early age, sport was a dominating force in his life. In New Plymouth, he immersed himself in a number of sports, taking up swimming, rugby, and surf life-saving competitively as a teenager. By his early 20s, he had represented Taranaki in all 3 sports and had gained New Zealand selection in both surf life-saving and swimming, attending the Melbourne Olympics in 1956 as part of the New Zealand surf life-saving team. Moving to Dunedin with his wife Betty and their young family, Duncan continued his involvement with swimming, taking up residence at Moana Pool as the professional swimming coach in 1966. He would remain in that role for the next 40 years, patrolling the lanes with keys and stick in hand, teaching generations of Dunedinites to swim. Not content to be solely a force in the water, the 70s saw Duncan juggling his coaching time between the swimming pool and the rugby field, where under his direction, a successful University A side achieved Dunedin Club Championship wins in 1970, 71 and 76. The Dunedin, Pirates and Zingari Richmond rugby clubs all felt the benefit of the Laing touch at times, Duncan having coached the premier teams at all 4 clubs during a 30-year period. His excellence as a rugby coach and his ability to spot talent was recognised by the Otago Rugby Union, who appointed him as coach of the Otago B side and as a selector for Otago. His ability to produce talented sportspeople wasn't lost on his own family. Of Duncan and Betty's children, 3 went on to represent New Zealand in surf life saving. His family also followed his other passions of swimming and rugby, continuing a love of sport long associated with the Laing name. Family and family values have always been important to Duncan and Betty, who recently celebrated their golden wedding anniversary. As well as raising 6 children of their own, they were also house parents at Moana House from 1975 to 1985, where they helped to provide a stable environment for young men who had become involved in the criminal justice system. But it's for his work in the pool that we best know Duncan Laing. In all those years at Moana Pool, he has averaged 3 lessons a day for 6 days each week for 47 weeks of the year. Over 40 years, that amounts to almost 34,000 sessions, and an awful lot of people learning to swim. He is one of New Zealand's finest ever sports coaches with a record in Olympic, Commonwealth and international swimming that's the envy of coaches the world over. Mr. Laing has coached swimmers and teams to success in every stroke, distance and competition. His name inextricably linked to those of Brett Naylor, Anna Wilson, Philip Rush, Jenny Newstead, Scott Cameron, and more recently Liz van Welie, Jonathan Duncan and Andrew McMillan. His special partnership with Danyon Loader is now legendary, having earned New Zealand its first Olympic golds in the pool. Duncan's contribution to sport and the community over the years has not gone completely unnoticed. He's been recognised with a number of awards, including an OBE, being named Coach of the Year at the Hellberg Awards on 2 occasions, and Dunedin Citizen of the Year in 1996. A life member of Swimming New Zealand, Duncan was finally inducted into the New Zealand Sports Hall of Fame earlier this year. His recent trip to Wellington to receive the Companion of the New Zealand Order of Merit shows the high esteem in which he is now held. Duncan Laing, a big man with a huge heart.
We on? Can you hear me? Good. Good afternoon, fellow New Zealanders and guests. Thank you, Xavier, for inviting me to speak at the Kiwi Leadership Network USA. There's a saying in philosophy, you are the company you keep, so keep good company. And I feel today, being very privileged to be here with some fine New Zealanders giving their stories, that the speeches were just marvellous today, and I've learnt a lot. And I've kind of got a similar theme about Duncan and Danyon that I'd like to share with you. Dr. Fraser, I think you'd be happy to know I've been a vegetarian for 25 years, and I also have done transcendental meditation for 30 odd years, so I never get angry, okay? Don't test me. I'm in the health and fitness industry. I'm in the crawl to creep industry. You start out crawling and you end up with your front wheel walker creeping. And it is a fact that you're going to lose your balance and lose your strength as you get older. And Xavier might be able to correct me on this, I was reading recently that we could possibly live to 140 right now, even without drugs. And my good old mother, she's 91 or 92 at the moment, I can't remember, so I'm starting to lose it. And she has a pretty good memory. She plays bridge 4 times a week. And so we've had some talks from the tech people today. Maybe that's an area that you could help with the aging people. I know some of the early studies with puzzles and things like that aren't conclusive to, keep the brain active and sharp. But first thing I want you guys to work on is something to do about glasses. I don't want to wear bifocals. I don't want to wear contact lenses, and I don't want the big print or surgery. So I'd like you to invent something where I can read and look at you at the same time. And it looks like, I know what I'm doing. Anyway, I have very fond memories of living in Dunedin and working in Dunedin in the 1980s and 1990s. The swimmers I worked with there, they were just fantastic kids, young, enthusiastic, just a great bunch to work with. And I've been involved in swimming, all my life in one way or another. My father was coaching before I was even born. And I remember being around 5 years of age, walking down the pool deck, holding his hand, as he coached the swimmers. And I could tell a lot of funny stories about my father, and if some of you know him, you'll probably know he was a little bit of a character. And And I've been on many, many swimming trips with my father. As a young coach, I would often room with him. It was easier for the swimmers to be able to come in and talk if we're both sharing a room. But my father had sleep apnea, so he had a CPAP machine and he had to wear the mask. And so it really felt like I was sleeping next door to Darth Vader. But I used to get him back because I used to take my own special coffee and plunger, and I'd make it really strong. And of course that smell, I love a coffee. And he would say, make me one. And it would be so strong. He would say, you're trying to poison me. But we had a lot of fun. I learned a lot of things. One funny story we had was at the World Champs in '94. I think it was my wife called me from New Zealand just to kind of catch up, and we had separate rooms at this time, and so went to his room, and so he comes down to my room, but he's just about to get into the shower, and he decides to put the towel around him, and he looks like a big sumo wrestler, and and so he comes down to my room with his towel, holding his towel, big guy, and knocks on the door, and I've got my boxers on because I've had my shower, and he says, oh, look, Rachel's on the phone, you got to come down and talk. So we go back down there, and we're locked out. And so we're standing there in the hallway, and then along comes the housekeeper. It was a guy actually, and I said, "Hey mate, you got the key? We can't get in." He's locked his key in, and I said, he is my father, and I don't speak Italian, but I think he said, "Yeah, sure, mate. Yeah, I believe you." So it was just always laughs with Duncan. We were always getting up to hijinks, and I could tell you hundreds of stories. But anyway, I think my background in swimming makes it easier to make a connection with many swimmers. It's about getting on the same wavelength regarding their swimming dreams and desires. And I could probably say that I act as a mentor to both Duncan and Danyon, and that I was always encouraging them to fulfill their potential. And particularly with Danyon, it was every 3 or 4 months. It was a 2 or 3 hour meeting of a lot of talking. Okay, because I'm a physical therapist, not a psychologist, and it could be I couldn't find often what the reason why he wanted to have a talk, but and so I'd have to cover a lot of stuff. Okay, just I'd have to second guess, and I couldn't tell you half the things that would just make him just click into a great attitude, and then the next month he would just swim just so incredibly well. So there was things like that we had going for a lot of years. Right, and so I moved to the States. Let me just kind of digress here a little bit. Just tell me a little bit about myself. I moved to the States here in 2001, and it was a little bit of a rough start, like a lot of the stories you've been telling today. I initially had problems with credentialing, and my father-in-law had passed away, and I had to wait 3, 4, 5 months before I could sit the boards, and we thought like, oh man, we should go back to New Zealand, and somebody said, no, you can go to the 51st state, New Mexico, and you can get your boards straight away, and I just didn't want to do that. And so, but I'd always been interested in working and learning in the United States. As a physical therapist and a swims coach, I was awfully interested in the shoulder. So as part of this journey, I decided to go to Australia first and get a master's in physical therapy at the University of South Australia. And my thesis was on the swimmer's shoulder, and I had a couple of great lecturers there, shoulder experts there, Mary McGarry and Mark Jones, to help me along the way. And then I moved to the United States and took a residency course in proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, treating stroke, traumatic brain injury and spinal cord patients. And there I was wanting to learn about the human body and motor learning and motor planning to be able to get back to function. And the therapists there were just unbelievable. I thought I'd met a lot of good therapists over the years, But the therapist there, I thought this was real physical therapy, to be able to help these neurological disorders back to some sort of functional capacity. It was just amazing. And I also wanted to learn a lot about the stroke shoulder, because the stroke shoulder has a presentation, an exaggerated presentation of what happens to the non-traumatic athlete shoulder. So now you can't often do much with a stroke shoulder. In fact, a lot of the times they teach them to use the other hand. But anyhow, this is this journey I was on to learn as much as I could about shoulders. And then from there I moved to Tucson, and I took up a job with a private clinic, but I was actually doing too much teaching. I was having to teach the therapist there a lot of skills, and I wanted to be more in a learning kind of situation. So after a year I took a job at the University Medical Center in Tucson, and that's a teaching facility, and I got in with a couple of excellent orthopedic surgeons treating musculoskeletal and sports injuries to the University of Arizona athletes. And so I was able to see a multitude of shoulder surgeries. I don't even think there's a shoulder surgery that I haven't treated. Total shoulder, reverse total shoulder, Mumfords, Latarjets, whatever. And so it was a lot of good learning about shoulders. And I was also a clinical instructor for undergraduate students on their orthopedic rotations during this time. And also during that time, I decided to do a year-long yoga teacher training. Again, because I had a great instructor. Actually, he's from LA here, Noah Mazay, one of the top yoga teachers in the country. And I wanted to learn about body alignment. I thought, I'm standing good. Because in swimming, the number one, the first principle is alignment, how you sit in the water. And so, I've done all these kind of courses to kind of just keep learning and expanding my knowledge base. And then more recently, I moved back into the private clinic, because that's the funny thing about the United States, is that as you get a little older, you kind of feel like you want a bit of change all the time. And I just found where I worked, every 6 months something was changing. Something would come down from the management. We're going to do this. You go, oh, good, that's good. I'm now on my 5th electronic medical record in 9 years, and they stink. All of them stink. But one or two of them are very good. So those surgeons that I worked with moved on. Actually, one of them passed on, and so the system started changing. And so now I'm not kind of getting what I wanted to do. So I've moved back into the private practice and got back in with a couple of good surgeons and some really top therapists to work with. And then on the swimming side, yes, I do 2 jobs. I do PT and I do coaching swimming. And on the swimming side, I started coaching a team on the east side of Tucson, and I was the head coach. And I was there for about 5.5, 6 years, and I had about 3 kids make the top 10. 3, let's say, under 16 kids were top 10 in the whole country of the USA. And then an opportunity came along for me to join the bigger club down at the university, and I felt that was a good move to get in with the Division 1 swimming college down there, at least beside them, because the club is in before them or after them, and at least I was able to talk to a lot of those. I know a lot of those coaches anyway. And just continuing the theme that everybody's been saying, I think New Zealand is by and large a hard-working, with many having that pioneering spirit, which is reflected in many success stories, and we've had them all up here tonight, today. And for me, and hopefully for you, these stories are very inspiring. And I certainly feel that Duncan and Danyon had this pioneering spirit, a real stickability to their hard work, irrespective of their hardship. They came from little old Dunedin. There was often very limited pool space. Danyon could train with Scott Cameron, but a lot of the time he had to train on his own, so he had no kind of training partners. And then when we wanted to travel overseas for training trips and competitions, it was rather costly. So we had to pick and choose which competitions we would go to. And we did get support from some good group, Otago Sports Trust. I don't even know if it still exists. And then one year we even got money from the casino to help us get where we needed to go. Now, Duncan had always had an ambition to produce an Olympic medalist. I don't probably think there's a coach that wouldn't have that kind of ambition. And so his swimming background, he was very connected to USA swimming. He was a very avid follower of the late, great James Dock Councilman, who himself was a great pioneer of American swimming. And he used the Councilman concepts to build a formidable swim team in the 1970s with several swimmers representing New Zealand at both the Olympic and Commonwealth Games. But of course, 90% of his swimmers either gave up or moved on with the 1980 boycott, but he still has swimmers representing New Zealand in surf lifesaving through the 1980s. And so by the late 1980s, of course, a young Danyon Loader is starting to come along and win age group titles and set age group records. So up until the late 1980s, there was predominantly only one way you train swimmers. And so the whole world kind of just trained the one way. So when you went to race, it was just kind of like a survival of the fittest, or who trained it. I don't even think it's the most or the best. It was, and I don't want to get into the physiology of it. And so Duncan thought, well, that kind of works for surf lifesaving. Surf lifesaving, all the finals are on the last day. It's a 4-day meet. You have all these, and so all your finals are on the last day. So if you're really fit, it kind of really worked well. But he realised from his past experiences that, you know, the Olympics and the world champs, they're heats and finals day after day, every day. And so you kind of got to do something different. And so he had this young chap, Danyon Loader, so he decided to change up his coaching methods, and he would write Danyon a very creative and demanding workout, and Danyon would breeze through it, and Duncan would praise him. So he would write an even more demanding workout, and Danyon would breeze through it again, and Duncan would praise him and shake his head, and at the amazement of his abilities. And so Duncan was trying to evolve his coaching methods, and sports science and swimming was only just starting to improve around this time. But we did receive some good data from Anna's father, Barry Wilson, who was a professor at the PE school at Otago University, which we could help and work into our system. Now, what happens in swimming, by the end of the 90s, there's now 3 distinct ways that you can coach swimmers. And of course, today, there's 6 ways, up to 6 ways that you can coach swimmers. So it's kind of always evolving. And so, Duncan was onto it at first, before any of this stuff became available. I don't really want to say too much more about that because he needed to keep changing more. It's probably what sent me off to the United States. Was we were trying to negotiate different ways of trying to work with the swimmers, and then the powers that be didn't really want the Laing kind of system to keep going. We were there, so that was fine. I go, well, that's fine. I accept that. I'll move on and try somewhere else. So now Danyon, he had a great work ethic. He was really hard working, and he became tough both physically and mentally through his development. He was an intelligent swimmer. He was ever so vigilant to his technique and to his breathing control and to his attention to details, his starts, his turns, his pacing. He was warrior-like in dealing with the pain and discomforts of hard training and fast racing. And he was a talented swimmer, but he's what we call a rhythm swimmer. So he's not just kind of legs and arms, and there's no rhythm to it. he could swim in rhythm, and this is what so it allows him to swim in a kind of sweet spot. So when he swims, it doesn't look like too much effort, and it doesn't look too relaxed, but it's fast. And the big advantage of this kind of thing is it aids your recovery. If I'm a total body use and a nice ballerina rhythm, it's a lot better on your recovery than, say, just arming it. Your arms are burnt out. You can't, if you're an arm swimmer and you burn your arms out, you can't come back the next day and burn your arms out again. So you have to slow down. And so Duncan was a high mileage coach, believing in a strong aerobic base, and he had an excellent eye for technique and the coaching of technique improvement. And so this combination of having a rhythm swimmer and Duncan putting the yardage on and keeping on top of his technique and making final adjustments, you can kind of see how Danyon can kind of make this progress. And mentally, Danyon would kind of operate in quite a nice sweet spot as well. He was never overthinking his swimming. He would never ask, like, shouldn't my hand be doing this, or, shouldn't I be going out wider here? He was never underthinking his swimming. He took total responsibility to understand the design of the set that Duncan was trying to put across to him, and he knew exactly where he was in the workout and what times he was swimming if we weren't timing him, and what lap he was on. And distractions and temptations he learned to keep in check. When you go to the Commonwealth Games, World Champs, Olympic Games, you got this big food hall, and you can just have as much as you like. And there's lots of sponsor booths and brand products, and he learned not to get caught in those things. They want to trap the athletes in there. He learned that he was there to do a job, so he kept well away from those things. He learned that from a very young age. I always used to say to him, if you get good enough, they'll give you those products anyway, and they did. After, once he succeeded at the Olympics with his sponsorships. So Danyon had goals, but he was rather quiet about his goals. He was really very aware that you need both the process and the goal. If he was too focused on the goal, then he's not focusing on his actions. That's the skills, the technique, and the hard training to attain those goals. So the process for Danyon was all about the action. It's action, action, action. And Danyon had tried sports psychology, and he enjoyed it, but he was attracted to the hero's journey, which has been a theme today. And I'm going to give you my version of it, which I had introduced him to in 1991 when we were at the Pan Pacific Games with the book by Dan Millman, Way of the Peaceful Warrior. And so the hero's journey is in many books and themes, and many athletes use, and everybody uses that kind of journey process. And the synopsis, let's give it like from Joseph Campbell and my version of it, is the hero was called to the adventure, and it's in Harry Potter and Star Wars. And let me give you the Star Wars side of it. Obi-Wan Kenobi turns up to Luke Skywalker, as he's out on the farm there, and says, I need you to come and help overcome these people that are, this evil person that's killing my people. And he says, no, you got the wrong person. I don't even know anything about, war or anything like that. So Luke Skywalker returns home that night and finds his uncle and aunt have been murdered or killed, or whatever word you want to use. And Obi-Wan Kenobi turns up and saying, look, these are the people killing my people, you need to come. So off he goes. And there's all these tests, tricks, and helpers. And he's bestowed with these supernatural powers, along this journey. And through all the trials and tribulations of the journey, he overcomes the dark force, and he returns a boon to society. There's peace back in society now. Everybody's living at peace. But to put it more in a lay way for the athlete, it's by saying, the task at hand will be extremely difficult. And there will be numerous obstacles to overcome. But if you dig down deep into your inner strength, you may have a measure of success, All right? And then from Eastern philosophy, for the everyday person, the hero's journey is about aligning with your true nature and becoming a mature, independent individual that coexists in society by acting in ways you have thought about. So it doesn't kind of have an end product like a lot of, and a lot of journeys don't. I mean, we're going to just kind of keep going for most of us. However, I was mostly trying to impart to Danyon to see and feel a journey as an experience. The experience of summoning the heart. Put your heart into it. The challenge and peril of your own heart. To keep working at it because you enjoy the experience. To live at the fullness of your potential, no matter what the outcome. Okay? And so negative experiences like poor swims or not getting enough rest were just seen as tests and tricks to the journey. There was very little brooding from Danyon, okay, for a lovely athlete to work with. If he was tired, he just knew to get more rest. And if he had a poor swim, he would get up and swim lights out the very next race. I remember being at the Nationals one year. We were trying to win the points trophy, and he had the 200 butterfly. And 20 minutes later, he had the 1500 freestyle, and he got out-touched in the 200 butterfly. And he didn't come back and talk to the coaches, and we don't usually like them. We like them to warm down. I could see him warming down. He's only got 20 minutes, and he gets out, and I see him swinging his arms. His goggles are still on his forehead, and he dives into the 1500, and he breaks the New Zealand record, and he smashes the New Zealand record. And that was the last 1500 he actually ever swam competitively. And he was like that with a lot of his races. If he swam his heat in the morning, he's very good with his feedback. And usually I would say, like, I wouldn't even give splits first. I'd say, like, how did it feel? And he would say, oh, it's a little sore. It's a little painful. Or, my arms I couldn't get my pushback going. So he's very good in his feedback. And so when you come back for the finals at night, he would often be the first guy in the pool. International meets or local meets. So you knew he was going to swim well because he was going to really prepare well. And so usually he knew if it was hurt too much, he didn't warm up enough. Okay, if he couldn't get his pushback going, often it was a lot to do with his, his ability to warm up. And all experiences were positive because ultimately the outcome is unknown. So you don't know if somebody on the other side of the world is prepared better. And so every race placing of either just making a final or getting fourth or third, or just, we'd often ask him to do times. Got 2 minutes? Oh, Jesus. Okay. This was treated with calmness, given the task ahead of trying to be at his best going to the Olympics. So perhaps I'd better finish up here by saying, so I'm not really telling you exactly what I would say to him, because that's kind of a book worth. Just a lovely athlete to work with. But I will say this, we were in the 1996, we were at altitude training, a pre-Olympic camp. We're up in Los Alamos, and we're just about to come down to go to California for a race, and then they're going to go off to the holding camp about 3 weeks out from the Olympics. It's about right from coming down from altitude. And I was going to go back to New Zealand. I could have gone to several Olympics, but it was just too... My job was not... I went to the Commonwealth Games. I really didn't enjoy it. I think it was better at home. I like the preparation better anyway. So anyway, so I decided we'd go and have a talk, and this is a final test to his maturity. And so we went out for lunch, and I said, are you ready to go? And he says, yeah. I said, do you have any doubts? And he says, no, I don't have any doubts that I'm gonna swim well. And I said, whoa, you got to keep a few doubts because we're still 3 weeks out. You've got to keep working on your details, your finishes, your turns, your pacing, your body alignment. You've got to just have a little bit of doubt to keep you working at those things. And then I said, I want you to just follow me here. I want you to think. I said, look, we're sitting at the cafe and it's 3 weeks after the Olympics. It's 3 weeks after the Olympics. And you've got 2 fourth placings. Okay? And I said, and if somebody said, you can do it again, you can have that experience again, what would you do differently? And he said, I'm going to keep preparing and I'm going to put my heart into it. And that's what he did. And he went to the Olympics. And it's interesting when we talk about goals, you have to, when you try to qualify for the Olympics, you often have to do times. But when you get to these world champs and Olympics, it's about trying to win or get the best place you can. So Duncan had to go down into the change room at the Olympics to find him before the 200. It was his first race, and Danyon's down there repeating world champ splits, world record splits, 26, 26.5, 26.3, 26 flat. And Duncan said, what are you doing? He says, I'm just trying to visualize those times in my head. And Dunk says, no, we're not here to do times. Just swim your heart out. Just see how it goes. And I was the one that kind of gave him the race plan. And so he swam the race, and of course he wins. And he was a little disappointed because he didn't break the world record. And I had to tell him when he got back, but the race plan was not to win the world record. The race plan was to win. And so, you can get disconnected sometimes with your swimmers. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Rick?
Rick, I was standing on the pool deck with your dad one day, and there was a guy swimming up and down, and he said to me, if hard work won medals, this kid would win a lot of medals. And he said the trouble is he'll never win a medal because good swimmers have a kinesthetic awareness of the water. They have a way of feeling the water. Do you agree with that, and did Danyon have that?
Oh, no, absolutely. You play a baseball and you're going to line up and you're going to throw. You need a ground reaction force. Kind of gives you a lot of proprioceptive input. And you don't have that in swimming. Your anchors are if you fight water, it fights back. And so it's this medium that you've got to manipulate. And so your anchors become that hand just pressing, and the timing is that hand goes in, that foot kicks down, and they're kind of your anchors to kind of get a feel for the water. And so definitely you've got to have that kinesthetic feel. And the thing is with Danyon, so he was already doing stuff that today we just absolutely drill the swimmers. He was already doing it way back then. You've got to remember that Danyon won those medals. So today he won those medals off pure training and attitude and his personal skills. He had to do it in a brief suit. Today they have bigger suits, and they can take at least a second off a lap. The suits that you have today. He did it without drugs. And he did it with the training methods that we were using at those times. So, no, he was quite ahead of his time. I take young swimmers now, I have 10-year-olds to 20-year-olds, and always my young students love the stories and love the what we're trying to do similar kind of thing to what Danyon was doing.
Yeah, I was interested in one of your very last comments where you said you've got to stay connected. Can you elaborate on what you meant by that?
Stay connected.
It's about he's going to swim with his heart.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, well, there's this psychological connection and the swimming connection. I mean, that's the thing with mentoring. It is you do make a connection with the athlete. You can't. And the funny thing is, I've got 40 odd swimmers in my group, and I definitely don't connect with all of them. So, we just had that kind of connection. So that I could, and from my experience of swimming, so it was easy to kind of understand him from body language and posturing and so on and so forth, as to get him into the right mental attitude to be able to swim. And it's interesting, we actually say connection now with physical side of swimming. That's the rhythm swimming. It's very connected, just flows in a nice rhythm. Okay, and when you get a swimmer and it looks very jerky, they're kind of unconnected. So I don't know, does that answer your question? Yeah. Oh, great. Cheers.